Insane national park disappearances you've never heard of. People are vanishing in national parks and forests across North America, under circumstances so bizarre they read like the script of a psychological thriller. These are stories that cannot be explained away by animal attacks or lack of preparedness. These accounts defy logical explanation. People who disappear while standing right next to a friend or loved one. No smoke, no magician, no dramatic flair. Just gone. Other times these people do reappear, but in places they simply could not have reached without using teleportation or time travel. I'm well aware that the stories I'm about to share with you seem absolutely crazy. I suspect this is why these accounts are rarely taken seriously by park officials. However, these stories need to be told, even if the government treats them as a joke. My father was a park ranger who took an early retirement nearly 2 decades ago. He'd heard of and witnessed so many unsettling and unexplainable things that he decided to compile a list of these cases that for some strange reason, nobody seems interested in investigating. Today we'll examine 3 of these cases. These are the stories of individuals who ventured into nature seeking peace or adventure but became unwilling entries in the missing persons database. If you're a fan of the strange, unsettling, and the unexplainable, then keep listening. Case 1. Greg Winslow and the Shadows of Cedar Ridge. Greg Winslow was a real estate agent from Boulder, Colorado, known for his deep love of hiking and nature photography. According to friends, his home was filled with photos of sprawling vistas, rugged trails, and captioned cliches about conquering mountains. In October 1986, Greg decided to take a solo trip to Cedar Ridge National Forest, a remote and heavily wooded area with a reputation for being as treacherous as it was beautiful. Greg arrived on October 12th, armed with his camera, high-tech camping gear, and a sense of invincibility honed by years of solo expeditions. His goal was to summit Bear's Fang, a jagged peak that locals swore had a bad energy. Greg, who prided himself on being logical and level-headed, dismissed the warnings with a laugh and a shrug, refusing to entertain such stupid nonsense. The first few days went according to plan. Greg hiked the lower trails, documenting his journey with numerous photos and journal entries. He noted in his travel journal how the dense canopy of cedar trees created an eerie green twilight even at noon. But he also wrote about oddities, shadows that seemed to shift in ways the sun couldn't explain, and a silence so profound it made him uneasy. On October 15th, Greg began his ascent. A park ranger spotted him at the base of the trail leading to Bear's Fang, and they exchanged pleasantries. "See you when you're back," the ranger said. Greg grinned and gave a little wave before starting off on his adventure. Unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw Greg. Days later, the ranger found Greg's campsite abandoned. His tent was zipped shut, with his gear neatly packed inside. A kettle of water sat on the portable stove, long since boiled dry. His boots were beside the tent, placed as if waiting for him to put them on, but Greg was nowhere to be found. A search ensued, and helicopters scanned the area. Rescuers found Greg's camera nearly 3 miles from his campsite, perched on a narrow ledge where no trail existed. The last photo it captured showed the forest, but there was something about the image that felt wrong. The tree trunks were strangely blurred as though vibrating, though the leaves on these same trees were not blurred at all. The details of the other plants surrounding the trees were all quite clear. It was just the trunks of the trees that were strangely out of focus. Sunlight shining through the treetops seemed oddly fractured into unnatural angles and gave a strange bluish cast to the photo. Everyone who viewed the photo, including my father, reported feeling as if they were seeing something they shouldn't be, leaving them feeling on edge and unsettled. To this day, Greg Winslow remains missing. Locals insist the forest took him, a cryptic explanation they refuse to elaborate on. Case 2, LILA Moreno and the Fog of Clearwater Pines. LILA Moreno, a 27-year-old environmental scientist from Seattle, Washington, was no stranger to wilderness. With a master's degree in ecology and countless hours spent in fieldwork, she was comfortable navigating the wild. In March 2000, LILA set out for a solo research trip to Clearwater Pines, a national park infamous for its unpredictable weather and dense otherworldly fog. Her goal was to study a rare moss species that thrived in the damp, misty conditions. She kept in contact with colleagues via satellite phone, updating them regularly on her progress. On March 7th, she called to say she'd found the moss and planned to hike deeper into the forest the next day to collect additional samples. This call was the last communication anyone received from LILA. When rangers arrived at LILA's campsite on March 10th, they found her gear meticulously organized as if she'd planned to return at any moment. Her journal detailed her findings but included odd notes in the margins. Heard a voice, not sure if it was the wind. Didn't see anyone. Weird. Another entry read, "Fog thicker than usual. Almost felt like something was watching me." The search for LILA lasted several weeks. Rescue teams and bloodhounds scoured the area, but all they found was her backpack, propped neatly against a tree 5 miles from her campsite. The tree appeared to be marked with strange symbols, though they were faint and unidentifiable. Some insisted LILA fell victim to the forest's natural dangers. They blamed wild animals or a misstep on a fog-shrouded trail, though they couldn't explain why her body or clothing was never found. Others, more familiar with the park and the bizarre stories that had been reported over the years, were convinced that she discovered something she shouldn't have. To this day they contend there is something in the fog, something that didn't want her to leave. Case 3. Nathan Hayes and the Vanishing Trail of Ravens Hollow. Nathan Hayes, a 31-year-old software engineer from Austin, Texas, was an aspiring survivalist who spent his weekends practicing bushcraft in the Texas Hill Country. In May 2002, Nathan decided to put his skills to the ultimate test with a week-long solo trek through Ravens Hollow, a secluded section of the Black Valley Wilderness Preserve. Nathan left a detailed itinerary with his roommate and religiously texted his progress during the first couple of days. He sent his last message on May 19th, which read, "Found spot by ridge, setting up camp." When the roommate didn't hear from Nathan the next day, he sent several follow-up messages, each one becoming a bit more frantic than the last. At first he wanted to blame the lack of response on poor reception due to the somewhat remote location, but as the days wore on, the worried roommate had no choice but to contact the park's rangers. When the rangers located Nathan's campsite, they found his tent completely shredded, its fabric lazily flapping in the late afternoon breeze. His gear was haphazardly scattered around the site, as though he'd fled in a hurried panic. A half-eaten sandwich sat atop a log, strangely untouched by the park's wild animals. And then, there was the trail, or lack thereof. The ground around the campsite was pristine, with no footprints leading in or out, though the ground was still damp from a late spring rain. It was as if Nathan had simply ceased to exist. A massive search effort ensued, lasting several weeks. Sadly, the only trace of Nathan the rangers ever found was a pocket knife, embossed with his initials. It was deeply embedded into the trunk of a dead oak tree, the blade strangely bent, almost twisted. The wooden handle was deeply scratched with traces of a blue substance that, to my knowledge, has never been identified. Theories about Nathan's disappearance have ranged from an animal attack to disorientation, but nothing accounts for the untouched food or the eerie absence of tracks. Locals, of course, have their own theory. They say the hollow is alive, and that it sometimes chooses someone. I'm not sure I can buy into this, but to be fair, I don't really have a better explanation. The Unsolved Mysteries of the Wild. What happened to Greg, Lila, and Nathan? Was it nature's wrath, human error, or something beyond our understanding? The answers remain elusive, locked away in the shadows of the wilderness. But one thing is certain: when you venture into the unknown, you risk becoming part of its mystery. Nature doesn't just call, sometimes it calls collect. And the cost of these collect calls is paid for with human life. Have you ever had strange encounters or experiences while in a national park? Please tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of unexplained disappearances.